All right, welcome everyone back to the Limitless Keys channel. In today's video, we are in part 2 of our series on talk music, how to play talk music. So if you have not seen the first part of the series, please check it out. In that video, we essentially talked about how we can get our diatonic chords from sounding, like the boring, good old diatonic walk-up that we're all used to something more like this. And then also how we can take those diatonic drop 2 chords and then just begin to start playing talk music. Right? So we just talked about how you can just kind of ascend and descend and jump around using these drop 2 chords to kind of get that talk music sound. So in this video today, we're going to talk about various extensions that you can add to your chords to make them sound a little more lush. We're going to talk about adding 6, 7s, and 9s. That's going to be the first concept. And then the second concept is adding sus2 and sus4 to your chords. So we're going to be in the key of D flat, which we were in the first video and which we're going to be in for the rest of the videos in this series, or C sharp, depending on how you want to call it. So we're going to explore these 6 and 7s and 9s that you can add to chords. So if you don't know too much about the numbers of the chords, what we're going to do is just basically break down the scale and show you the numbers. So here's our D flat major scale, right? And we can assign numbers to each note in that scale. So here's our 1, our 2, our 3, our 4, our 5, our 6, our 7, and our 1 or 8. But you can continue going up and say 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. Now 14 and 15 are typically not like official names that are included in chords. Usually we stop at 13. But what we see is that from the scale, we have all of these numbers. So when we typically play our triad, we're usually playing the first, third, and fifth scale degree. But as I mentioned, we can also add the 6, the 7, and the 9. Remember, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Now, you would notice that the 9 is the same as the 2, so it's interchangeable. You can say add 9 or add 2. They're basically the same thing. But again, we can have our basic diatonic chord sounding like this, or our root position chord sounding like this, the triad, and then we can add our 6, 7, 9. And you see how this chord sounds a lot richer already. So if we go to our drop 2 voicing, which we covered in the first video, and we add our 6, 7, 9, this is what we get. So we have a chord that originally sounded like this, which is not bad in itself, but when we add the 6, 7, and the 9, it just sounds a lot more rich, right? So we can do this with all of our chords pretty much. We can do this with our 2 chord. Here's our 2 chord in its drop 2 position. And we can add the 6, the 7, and the 9. And we can actually resolve this 9 here if we want to. So when we go to our 3 chord, which is our 1 over 3, right? We can add the 6, the 7, and the 9. Remember our 6, 7, and 9? Because again, this is 1 over 3, so it's just like our D flat or C sharp major chord. So our 1 over 3, we're going to add the same note, 6, 7, 9. We go to our 4 chord, we have our 6, our 7, and our 9. Our 5 chord, 6, 7, 9. Now what you're going to notice about this 5 chord right here, this A flat major, is that when we add the 7, we're adding a major 7, and that major 7 is not diatonic to the key of D flat. Here's our D flat major scale. So this G is not in the scale, but it's going to work because when you're playing other major and minor 7 chords and other rich chords, even though this note is not diatonic, this chord with the major 7 will carry a similar lush sound to the other chords. So this is just like a quick trick when you're playing music. Even if you're not playing diatonic chords, if you're playing similar style chords, it will still kind of flow, and we're going to see that in a second. So we're going to come to our 6 chord, which is our 4 over 6. It's not a 6 minor chord, it's our 4 over 6. And we can again add our 6, 7, and 9, the same notes for our 4 chord. And then we come to our 7 chord, which is our 5 over 7. And again, it is just like our 5 chord, so we're going to add our 6, 7, and 9. And then come back to our 1 chord. So what I'm going to do here in a second is play our original sort of drop 2 voicing for the chord and then play it with the extensions added to the chord so that you can hear how much of a difference it's going to make in your playing. And I just want to add something very quickly, or give you a little tip. You don't need to always add the 6, the 7, and the 9 to your chords. You can kind of like selectively choose which one you want to add. You may want to just add the 6 or just the 9 or just the 7, or you may want to add the 6 and the 7 or the 6 and the 9 or the 7 and the 9. Hopefully I said every combination, but you get the point. So when I actually play it, I'm not going to add the 6, the 7, and the 9 to every chord. I'm just going to kind of flow, and whatever numbers come out are going to kind of come out. So here's our original scale. Right? Now, if we modify it a little, we may have something like, ooh, ooh, So it sounds a lot more rich, right? It sounds a lot more lush. And what you're going to notice is, again, I played that 5 chord with the major 7, and it still sounded good. And again, because we're playing all of our chords lush, even though that major 7, which is not diatonic, is in there, it still works. So now what I'm going to do is maybe show you 2 drop 2 patterns that I kind of showed in the first video and what they sound like if we use the original voicings versus the modified voicings. So we're going to start with just this progression that I did in the first video where we walk down from our 6th scale degree all the way down to our 5, something like this. Sounds very nice, right? But if we add some of those extensions, so I actually did a sus4 right here, which we're going to talk about in a second because of the C sharp, but you can see the difference already. It has a much different feel, right? Again, if I do kind of another progression that I did in the last video, where we did 1, 3, 4, 6, and then 1, 3, 4, 6. If I add some modifications, my 1 chord may sound something like this. My 3 chord may. Okay, I'm doing some a little more fancy stuff here. It's a little bit hard for me to just actually play it like this. I have my kind of own way of voicing my chords, which are a little different than what I was just doing, but I was just doing a few examples. And this leads to another important point that I just want to bring up. When it comes to you voicing chords, you can voice the chords really however you want. And I'm just going to add this here now, even though in the first video, I mentioned how drop 2 is kind of like the foundation of talk music. You can at any time leave drop 2. You don't need to stay in drop 2. In fact, when I begin adding passing chords and doing other stuff, I don't stay in drop 2. So you don't need to stay in drop 2 the entire time. But what I would recommend you doing is figuring out voicings for chords that work for you. Here's what I mean. Let's just take our 1 chord. Now, some people may play their 1 chord like, okay, just regular like this. Some people may do a sus2 with the 3. Some people may double a major 7 in the left and right hand. Some people may do a kind of rootless voicing with the add 6. Some people may do like a cluster voicing. Some people may voice it like that. Some people may voice their 1 chord like this. Some people may space it out even more and voice it like this. Right, so there's so many different ways that you can voice your chords, and what I would recommend is you practicing the voicings which feel good to you and which sound good to you is really the main thing. That's how I really develop my chords. I just practice adding notes, like I'll add the 6, the 9, the 7, but then I'll kind of work out the chord until it sounds kind of appealing to me, especially as I resolve it to other chords. And then on top of that, if you want to make the chord drop 2 by dropping the second highest note, you can do that, right? So you don't have to explicitly stay in drop 2, but it's just a good foundation point for teaching, to kind of teach you that you can take your drop 2 voicings and just add a few notes to them to make it sound a lot more like professional. So That's that. So the second concept now that we're going to cover, we covered the first again, which is the 6, 7, and the 9. What we're going to cover now is the sus2 and sus4 chords. So I actually like to do sus2 and sus4 chords, and I'm going to play them right here. You kind of heard me do something like this at the beginning of the video. So those are all actually sus2. Well, yeah, sus2 and sus4 chords. So I'm going to explain to you how they're sus2 and sus4. So if you don't know about sus2 and sus4 chords, I'll make it very simple. So let's take our 1 chord in its root position. We're going to notice that we have our 1, 3, and our 5, our first scale degree, third, and fifth scale degree. Sus4 essentially means that we're going to raise our third scale degree to the 4. Now it sounds unresolved. There's some tension. But if we take that 4 down to the 3, it resolves. And we can also do a sus2, which means we're going to take our third scale degree and drop it to the 2. So here's our third scale degree, our 1, 3, 5, our root triad. And then we're going to drop that 3 to the 2 and then resolve it. So you hear this a lot of times, maybe in more classical music. A song may go 2 and then may go like 1/5 and then dominant 5 and then go or, you know, sometimes they'll go, let's do it 2, 1/5, dominant 5, and then go like this. Or, so the point is that you're kind of dancing around the third scale degree with the 2 and the 4 to make it resolve. You can just go, right, 4, 3, or 2, 3, or 2, 4, 3, or 4, 3, 2, right? So that's kind of the sus2, sus4 sound. Now, how do we get from this kind of like this very classical sound to a chord that sounds like this? Right? Well, I'm going to show you. So when we play our 3 chord, which we typically play as a 1/3, which I showed in the first video, what we can do is add the sus2 to the chord. So the second scale degree of our D flat chord would be this E flat. So here's our D flat, here's our 1, here's our 2. So if we're going to make it sus2, we're just adding the 2. And what I like to do is double the 5 in my thumb and pinky. So what I'm doing here in my right hand is 5, 1, 2, 5. Very good, cool voicing. You can use this voicing over all sorts of chords. Right? It's just a very nice voicing to use in general, this sus2 voicing. Now in our left hand, we have our 3. So right now we have a sus2 chord, but to make it a sus4 chord, we're gonna add the 4. So I'm gonna add the 4 right above my third scale degree. Right above this F is F sharp. And here's my sus2, sus4 chord. Right? We have our 1 chord right here, and then we have our sus2 and then our sus4. So the chord sounds a little bit weird, probably you hearing it right now, but again, if we right? In context, it's very beautiful, very rich chord. It's not resolved. Now, what I don't do, I don't actually resolve the sus2 and the sus4, like how we went here, or I just leave it unresolved. Just like I do sus2, sus4 here, this is also a sus2, sus4 chord. And once you start getting familiar with these sus2, sus4 chords, you can start hearing them. You would realize that these are actually the same chords, just for different scale degrees, right? So I'm doing this for my 1/3, and this is my sus2, sus4 chord for my 5/7. Let's look at it. So here's our 5/7 or our 7 chord, drop 2, right? It's our A flat major chord, right? A flat major, dropping the second highest note in the bass. And then what we can do is add our 2, right? And then again, with my technique, I double my the fifth of whatever I'm playing. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right? We're playing A flat major chord. So the 5th scale degree of that A flat major is this E flat. So double it in my thumbs and pinkies, the 5, and then play the 1 and the 2. And then we are playing the 3 in the bass, the 3rd scale degree, right? And then we're just adding the sus4. And that's the chord, right? So remember, this is my A flat major chord. A flat sus2 adds the C sharp or D flat. A flat sus4 adds the D flat or C sharp. Sus2 would add the B flat. And here's my 3rd scale degree right here, right? So with this chord, I have my A flat major chord, then sus2, and then sus4. So there we go. So then what I like to do a lot of times is just jump between my 1 and my 5, or my 3 and my 7, however you want to look at it, right? The last sus2, sus4 chord that we're going to talk about, actually there's 2 more we're going to talk about. We'll talk about it for the 4 major chord, and then the 2 minor and 6 minor chord. So if we come to our 4 chord, which is F major, what I like to do is do this sound. Hear that? Sounds very nice. And this is also, well, sus2, sus4. Now, we're actually borrowing this from, well, there's 2 ways to think about this. One, you could look at it as we're borrowing from another mode, or you can just look at it in terms of the C sharp. Here's what I mean. If we play F sharp, here's our F sharp major scale. So the 1 chord would be like this. Our sus2 would technically, or sus4 would technically be this, and we would resolve it. And then our sus2 would technically be this. But you notice that when we're in the key of C sharp, this B is not diatonic to the key. So when I'm playing this, I'm doing, that's what I'm doing. It's not, right, our normal sus4. And that sounds a little bit weird when you're hearing it now, because you're hearing the proper sus4. So what we're doing is actually borrowing from another mode. If you think about it, I don't know the name of my modes. I think this is Lydian, sharp 4 is Lydian, right? Where we have 1, 2, 3, sharp 4, 5, 6, 7, 1. You can correct me in the comments below if it's not Lydian. I know it's not Dorian, because Dorian is, I think, flat 7. So what we're doing is technically the like sus4 in Lydian, I guess, in that mode where we're doing. But there's another way that you can think about it. How I like to think about this chord oftentimes, right? How I like to think about it is I'm actually playing my 1 chord over my 4 chord and then resolving it over my 4. So what I'm doing, or resolving it to the 4. So what I'm doing here is playing my 1 chord as a major 7. Let's invert it. Let's invert it again. Let's invert it one more time. What you notice here is that if I take this chord and I put it over my 4, and then I resolve this C to the B flat, I kind of get that sound. Now what I do is I omit the 3, which is the major 7. So I just, which would be the major 7 of that F sharp. I omit that note, and I just kind of play this kind of like shell voicing for my C sharp or D flat major 7 chord. So this is, right, the major 7 chord, right? It's like I'm playing these notes, but just kind of inverting it, right? So it's my 1 chord as a major 7 over my 4. So, and then just resolve that C to the B flat. Now what you can do if you want to make it a sus2, sus4 chord is that you can, instead of, in my thumb, how I'm playing my, my 1, 5, 1, like that kind of typical pattern in your left hand, what I'm doing is 1, 5, 2. So this makes it a sus2 chord, right? And then when I add that C, it's sus2, sus4, and then I can resolve both of them down. So what I'm doing here, just right? Very beautiful sound. Now what we're going to do is talk about, those are all our major chords, right? Now we're going to talk about our 2 minor and 7 minor, and then we'll wrap up the video. So you can also kind of do a sus2, sus4 sound for your minor chords as well. So if we have our E flat minor, right? If I make it sus4, it's going to be, yeah, that's that like classical minor sound. Or, right? Coming from underneath it. So here's our root position. Here would be our sus4 and then resolve. And here would be our sus2 and then the resolution. So the way that I like to think about playing my sus2, sus4 chord for my 2 chord is I like to think about putting 1 over 2. My 1 chord over my 2 chord. So if I put E minor in my left hand, let's just play our 1 and our 5 for our E minor. And then let's put here this 1 chord, our C sharp or D flat major chord over that E flat. What you're going to notice right here is that I have my sus2 and my sus4, or my 2 and my 4. So it kind of makes it a sus2, sus4 chord. And listen, you hear it? And you can do diminished stuff. That's for a future video. But essentially right here is what I'm doing is when I put that, right, C sharp major or D flat major over my 2 chord, what happens is that C sharp or D flat major includes these two notes, which are the sus2 and sus4, or the 2 and the 4, kind of giving it that suspended sound. Or you can maybe just leave out the C sharp if you don't like that sound. Sounds very nice, right? And what we can do now for our 6th chord is something very similar. We can put our 5 over our 6 to make it a sort of sus2, sus4 sound. So if I play my 6th scale degree, which is my B flat minor, and I put my 5 over it, right? Right here, these two notes would be my 2 and my 4, and then I can resolve them. And we can mess around with that diminish. Again, future videos, we're going to talk about the diminished stuff a little bit more. But again, here's my B flat minor chord. Here's my sus4 resolve. And then here's my sus2 resolve. Hear it? So when I put that A flat over it, hear it? Or I can remove the A flat and just play the top two notes. So let me just pick something and kind of play around, and I'll kind of break it down for you. So. I'm adding diminished here. And adding some passing chords. So what did I do here? I don't know exactly what I played. I just was doodling around. But again, here's my sus2, sus4. I did something like that, right? Did a sus2, sus4. Then I did my 7 chord. And what I did on my 7 chord is I added my 6, my 9, and my 2. So again, remember our 6th chord is our 4 over 6. So here's my 6, my 7, and my 9. So I did something like that. Then I went to my 5 chord as a major 7. So I'm adding the 7. I did my 4 chord like this, maybe as a major 7. And then adding the 9 here. So then I kind of went to my 3 chord, something like that maybe, right? And then I went to my 2 chord, sus2, sus4, resolve. Then I did a few other things, right? And I ended up going to my 6 at some point where I also did the sus2, sus4. And then went to my 2, 1 over 5, and then did, went to my 1. So you can hear how just adding sus2, sus4s, adding your 6s, your 7, your 9 to your chord can radically change your playing. So if this video was helpful to you in any way, shape, or form, please subscribe to the channel, drop a like, it will help me out, and leave a comment if you have any questions. I'll see you in the next video where we're going to talk about little licks and lead notes that you can add to your talk music and drop 2 playing, which will radically transform what you're doing. So I'll see you in that video.